The night sky over the Caribbean wasn't supposed to glow. But at 02:14 a.m. on March 17th, radar operators from Puerto Rico to Curacao saw it, a bloom of light across the horizon, where no light should exist. A pulse of orange and white that painted the clouds for 3 seconds, then vanished into darkness. Venezuelan patrols had just locked their targeting systems on an unidentified vessel. They thought it was another U.S. freedom of navigation stunt, the kind Washington had been running for months, daring Caracas to blink first. They were wrong. Within seconds, the sea erupted. Anti-ship missiles streaked low across the waves, their exhaust trails carving white scars against the black water. Thunder rolled for miles. Communications died mid-sentence. Satellites blinked out like candles in wind. By dawn, half the Caribbean was a blackout zone. It wasn't war, not officially. The Pentagon would call it a defensive engagement. Caracas would claim a historic victory. The UN would issue statements. But history would remember it differently. History would remember it as the night Venezuela stopped laughing at the U.S. Navy. 6 months earlier, August 2024. The collapse didn't happen overnight. Venezuela had been bleeding for years, its economy strangled by sanctions, its oil fields crumbling, its people fleeing by the millions. But the regime survived. It always survived. And it did so by breaking the rules. Shadow fleets, they called them. Tankers with flags of convenience, registered in nations that asked no questions. They moved Venezuelan crude through the Caribbean under cover of night, slipping past satellite coverage, transmitting false positions, vanishing into the maritime shadows. The Americans knew. Of course they knew. "We tracked every ship," said former NSA analyst David Kellerman in a leaked interview. "Every fake transponder, every midnight rendezvous. But knowing and stopping are different things." Washington's response was predictable: more patrols, more surveillance. The U.S. Southern Command quietly increased its Caribbean presence. Destroyers, cutters, P-8 Poseidon aircraft circling overhead like patient hawks. It was routine, they said, just ensuring freedom of navigation. But Admiral Luis Ortega didn't see it that way. September 15, 2024, Venezuelan Naval Command, La Guaira. Ortega was Old Navy, trained in the Soviet era, weathered by decades of seeing his country humiliated. He'd watched the Americans sail wherever they pleased, acting as though Venezuela's territorial waters were their private lake. "They think we're a joke," he told his staff during a closed briefing. "They think we'll bark and never bite." He began quietly repositioning coastal radar installations, upgraded Soviet-era systems with Chinese electronics, moved mobile anti-ship batteries to hidden positions along the coast. Nothing overtly aggressive, just preparation. On the American side, Rear Admiral Michelle Hartman watched the pieces move. "We saw the buildup months before," she later told congressional investigators. "Increased radar activity, communications patterns changing, but the assessment was always the same. Deterrence posturing, nothing actionable." Both sides wanted to prove a point. Neither expected to draw blood. October to December 2024. The pressure builds. The incidents started small. Venezuelan patrol boats shadowing U.S. vessels at uncomfortably close range. American helicopters buzzing Venezuelan installations. Radio exchanges that grew increasingly hostile. "Unidentified vessel, you are approaching Venezuelan territorial waters." "Venezuelan patrol, this is U.S. Navy destroyer Mason. We are conducting lawful operations in international waters." You have 30 seconds to alter course. We will not alter course. Repeat, we will not. The media barely noticed. Just another Caribbean standoff. Another game of chicken between a declining superpower and a collapsing petrostate. But in the intelligence community, the whispers were different. There's a line. We just don't know where it is yet. January 2025. The leak. Commercial satellite imagery showed something unexpected. Venezuelan mobile radar platforms moving into aggressive forward positions, not defensive, not routine, targeting positions. The Pentagon held emergency consultations. The assessment? Ortega was establishing an anti-access bubble, trying to keep U.S. ships at arm's length without technically firing first. A game of nerves. The problem, Hartman explained later, was that games of nerves require both sides to be rational. On January 28th, a U.S. Navy P-8 detected unusual electronic emissions from Venezuelan coastal installations. Not radar pings, something else, weapons guidance frequencies. Going active. That's when we knew, said one Pentagon official who spoke on condition of anonymity. They weren't just posturing anymore. They were ready to shoot. The question was, at what? Act 2. The Incident. March 14, 2025, 14:30 local time. The USS Mason departed Naval Station Mayport with orders for a routine patrol, routine being the Pentagon's favorite word for operations that skirted the edge of confrontation. Her mission? Freedom of navigation exercise along the outer edge of Venezuela's claimed exclusive economic zone. Standard procedure, done 100 times before, except this time Venezuelan naval intelligence was waiting. March 15, 2025, 2200 local time. The patrol boat Naiguata received its orders directly from Admiral Ortega's command. Shadow the American destroyer, make them uncomfortable, show national resolve. Do not fire unless fired upon, but do not back down. 2 ships, 2 sets of orders, 1 shrinking piece of ocean. March 16, 2025, 11:47 local time. The Mason's radar picked up the Venezuelan vessel at 12 nautical miles. Close, but not threatening. Captain Jennifer Rhodes ordered routine defensive posture, weapons systems ready but not locked. The Naiguata closed to 8 miles, then 6. Venezuelan patrol vessel, this is U.S. Navy warship on your bearing 270. Recommend you maintain safe distance for navigation. Silence. 5 miles. Venezuelan vessel, you're approaching unsafe proximity. American warship, you're in Venezuelan waters. Alter course immediately or be considered hostile. We are in international waters conducting lawful. The argument was academic. Both crews knew it. What mattered now was who blinked. March 16, 2025, 1923 local time. The electronic ghost. Nobody could later agree on what happened next. The Mason's electronic warfare officer reported a sudden burst of interference across multiple frequencies. The Naiguata's communications officer reported the same thing. Both ships' radios filled with static. For 90 seconds, neither vessel could communicate clearly, not with each other, not with their commands, not with anyone. In that silence, everything changed. The Naiguata's fire control radar suddenly went active, painting the Mason with targeting energy. On the American destroyer, alarm screamed. "Vampire! Vampire!" the tactical officer shouted. "Missile lock!" Captain Rhodes had seconds to decide. The Venezuelan patrol boat's forward cannon rotated toward the Mason. She ordered defensive fire. March 16, 2025, 1924 local time. The Mason's 5-inch gun fired twice, warning shots officially. They landed 50 meters ahead of the Naiguata's bow, sending up geysers of white water. On the Venezuelan boat, chaos erupted. The captain screamed orders. Was it a warning or an attack? The communications were still garbled. The rules of engagement were clear. If fired upon, return fire. The Niquota's 76mm cannon fired back. The first round missed high. The second struck the Mason's forward superstructure, sending shrapnel tearing through radar equipment and wounding 3 sailors. On both bridges, the same thought crystallized with horrible clarity. This was no longer a drill. March 16 to 17, 2025, the silence. Neither government acknowledged the incident, not immediately. The Pentagon issued a brief statement about a minor navigation incident in international waters. Caracas claimed an American warship had been repelled from Venezuelan territory. But satellite footage doesn't lie. Commercial imaging satellites had captured the exchange. Within hours, the images leaked to media outlets. Twitter exploded. Reddit analyzed every pixel. Defense analysts dissected the footage frame by frame. "That's not a navigation incident," one former Navy officer commented on CNN. "That's an act of war." Both governments doubled down on their denials, but in the Caribbean, every naval vessel suddenly went to high alert. Intelligence agencies scrambled. Embassies activated crisis protocols. And in La Guaira, Admiral Ortega made a fateful decision. If they want war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. March 17, 2025, 01:47 a.m. The USS Stockdale detected them first. Multiple radar contacts going active along Venezuela's northern coast. Not defensive early warning systems, targeting radars. All pointing north. Multiple air search radars going active, the tactical officer reported. Fire control systems energizing across the coast. Rear Admiral Hartman, commanding the task force from the carrier USS George H.W. Bush, 300 miles north, listened to the reports with growing dread. "They're not bluffing anymore," she said quietly. At 01:52 a.m., the decision tree collapsed to a single question: wait to be targeted or eliminate the threat first. Hartman ordered a limited strike on Venezuelan coastal radar installations. Tomahawk cruise missiles only, no aircraft, minimize casualties, just send a message. "This is a defensive action," she told her staff. "We take out their targeting capability, they stand down, everyone goes home." But Venezuela was already launching. March 17, 2025, 0:03 a.m., the missiles fly. 23 Chinese-made C-802 anti-ship missiles roared off their coastal launchers simultaneously. Their targets? Every U.S. naval vessel detected within 300 kilometers. The Mason, still limping from the earlier engagement, detected the inbound missiles with 15 seconds of warning. Her phalanx system engaged automatically, spitting thousands of rounds into the darkness. 2 missiles fell into the sea. The third got through. It struck amidships below the waterline, punching through steel like paper. The explosion killed 9 sailors instantly and ignited fires that would burn for hours. Across the Caribbean, the night erupted. 01:14 to 0:06 a.m., the chaos. The recordings that would later emerge painted a picture of controlled chaos spiraling into something darker. Eagle 1, we've lost visual. What the hell was that? Multiple impacts near Grid 9-4, fires visible from. Can't raise Mason, repeat, cannot raise Mason. Venezuelan aircraft inbound, bearing 27. Jam everything, just jam everything. Command, this is Stockdale. We are engaging multiple surface contacts. The Venezuelan Air Force launched 14 fighters. Half were obsolete Su-30s that barely got airborne before U.S. Fa-18s from the Bush established air superiority. The others turned back when their ground control radars went dark. On the ground, Venezuelan mobile missile batteries continued firing blindly into the darkness, their targeting data corrupted by electronic warfare. Admiral Ortega, in his hardened command center, watched his displays go dark one by one. His grand plan, his moment of national defiance, was evaporating in the face of American technological superiority. He gave one final order: Launch everything remaining. 4:33 a.m. The second wave. Venezuela's last 9 operational anti-ship missiles launched into the pre-dawn darkness. Most flew wild, their guidance systems scrambled. 2 found the Stockdale, one striking her stern and another her helicopter hangar. The destroyer survived, but barely. Hartmann, watching the battle space collapse into chaos, made the hardest decision of her career. She ordered her aircraft to strike Venezuela's only major naval base at Puerto Cabello. The attack lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, Venezuela's Blue Water Navy effectively ceased to exist. 6 a.m., the blackout. As the sun rose over the Caribbean, something impossible had happened. 300 miles of coastline had gone dark. No lights, no communications, no power. The Tomahawk strikes had severed Venezuela's northern electrical grid. Combined with the coastal installation destruction, an entire region had simply stopped. The electromagnetic warfare had been so intense that even commercial satellites lost telemetry for hours. The Caribbean had become a black zone. No cameras, no witnesses, just scattered radio fragments and the distant glow of fires. For 6 hours, the world held its breath, unable to see what was happening in those dark waters. Noon, the silence. When communications finally stabilized, the accounting began. USS Mason, severely damaged, 12 dead. USS Stockdale, damaged, 7 dead. Venezuelan Navy, 4 vessels sunk, 3 damaged beyond repair. Venezuelan Air Force, 6 aircraft destroyed. Coastal installations, 70% destroyed. Power grid collapsed across 3 provinces. Civilians, unknown, but the dark coastline suggested thousands without power, water, or medical care. And yet, officially, no war had been declared. March 17 through 20th, 2025. The political scramble. The Pentagon's first statement came at 11 a.m. U.S. forces conducted a successful defensive operation against hostile threats in the Caribbean region. All personnel are accounted for. Caracas issued its own statement hours later. The Bolivarian Republic has successfully defended its sovereignty against North American aggression. The invaders have been repelled. Both were lying. The UN Security Council convened in emergency session. Russia and China demanded investigations into American aggression. The U.S. insisted it had acted in self-defense against Venezuela's first strike. Nobody mentioned that both sides had fired simultaneously, that the first shot was impossible to determine because both navies had launched within a 3-minute window. Oil markets panicked. Brent crude spiked $42 overnight. Caribbean shipping ground to a halt. Airlines rerouted around the entire region. And in the darkness of northern Venezuela, the humanitarian crisis began. March 21st through 25th, 2025. The human cost. Maria Contreras lived in Punto Fijo, a coastal city that lost power when the grid collapsed. For 4 days, she and her neighbors waited in the dark while hospitals ran on backup generators and water pumps fell silent. "We heard the explosions," she told reporters later. "The sky glowed orange. We didn't know if it was war or the end of the world." 7 people died in her neighborhood alone, unable to reach medical care, unable to call for help. In the United States, military families gathered at bases from Virginia to California, waiting for casualty notifications. 19 sailors had died in the engagement. Dozens more were wounded. Captain Rhodes of the Mason would later testify before Congress, her voice steady but her eyes hollow. "We followed our rules of engagement. We protected our ship. We did everything right. And 19 families still got folded flags." April 2025. The mystery. Congressional hearings began. Investigations launched. Satellite data was subpoenaed. Radio recordings analyzed. Every decision scrutinized. But the key question remained unanswered. Who fired first? The 90-second communications blackout, the electronic ghost that had started everything, defied explanation. Some analysts suggested natural atmospheric interference. Others pointed to electronic warfare from a third party. A leaked NSA report mentioned anomalous electromagnetic activity consistent with advanced jamming technology, but stopped short of attribution. Chinese systems? Russian interference? An accident of solar activity? To this day, no one knows who fired first, said former CIA Director Thomas Brennan in a classified briefing. Both sides claim they were defending themselves. Both sides might be telling the truth. The satellite logs that could definitively answer the question were classified at the highest levels and would remain so for 50 years. Conspiracy theories flourished online. Some claimed it was a false flag. Others insisted a third nation had triggered the conflict deliberately. A few believed it was simply the inevitable result of two nations playing chicken in a shrinking ocean. The truth, like so much of modern warfare, dissolved into the fog of competing narratives and classified archives. May 2025. The new normal. The Caribbean returned to calm. U.S. patrols resumed, though now with far more caution. Venezuela's navy, decimated, retreated to port. The shadow oil trade continued, but quieter, more carefully. Diplomatic back channels reopened. Neither side wanted to admit what had happened, so both pretended it hadn't, at least not officially. But the sailors who were there knew better. The families who lost loved ones knew better. The Venezuelan civilians who spent weeks without power knew better. And the radar operators who watched the Caribbean light up that night, they would never forget. Epilogue. History rarely writes about the wars that never officially happened, the conflicts that exist in classified reports and sealed congressional testimony but never make it into textbooks. The night of March 17, 2025 would be remembered as an incident, a footnote in the long tense relationship between Washington and Caracas. Just another near miss in a world full of them. But for those who saw that night sky burn with the light of missiles and explosions, for those who heard the thunder roll across dark waters, for those who counted the dead and mourned the missing, it was war enough. The Caribbean still glitters in the moonlight. Ships still pass through its waters. Tourists still visit its islands, unaware that beneath those gentle waves lies the wreckage of vessels and the ghosts of sailors who died in a war their governments claimed never happened. And on certain nights, when the wind is right and the moon is dark, radar operators from Puerto Rico to Curaçao still watch their screens a little more carefully, just in case the sky decides to light up again.